So, picture this, a nation that's at the absolute top of its game. We're talking peace, wealth, a feeling that you are absolutely blessed and untouchable. Now, imagine a single voice, some shepherd from out of town, starts shouting that it's all a lie, that the whole beautiful system is about to come crashing down. Well, that's the story of the prophet Amos, and believe me, it has a shocking amount to tell us about the hidden price of prosperity.
Right from the jump, the book of Amos hits you with this incredible image. God isn't some gentle, quiet figure in the background. No, he is a roaring lion. And that roar means something terrifying is coming. It's a signal that a drought is on its way, that all the green, prosperous land is about to just wither and die. This is the first definitive warning shot, and it's a sign that the good times are about to end. Fast.
And this brings us to the big burning question, right? At the time, under a king named Jeroboam II, Israel was just thriving. I mean, if you looked at them from the outside, you'd think everything was perfect. So what on earth was going on under the surface that could provoke this kind of divine anger? The answer is, well, it's pretty startling, and it might sound surprisingly familiar.
To really get why that roar was so terrifying, you gotta picture the scene. This was a golden age for Israel. Military victories, a booming economy. For the wealthy, life had literally never been better. So you can see how a country like that could get a little complacent, right? How they could start to believe they were special, chosen, maybe even invincible. But as we're about to see, that very comfort was setting them up for a massive fall. And here we get to the absolute heart of the problem. All that comfort led to this deep spiritual laziness. They started looking at their wealth not as a gift that came with responsibilities, but as something they were just entitled to. And of course, once they forgot where their blessings came from, they also forgot why they were supposed to care for the poor and the vulnerable. Their prosperity was actually being built on a foundation of deep, deep injustice. So the first major charge Amos levels against them is aimed squarely at this toxic relationship they had with their own wealth. Their obsession with more stuff, more luxury, more comfort had basically become a cancer, eating away at the soul of the nation. It had replaced their relationship with God and their compassion for their own people. Okay, you have to appreciate the raw, shocking nerve of Amos here. He walks into the capital city, Samaria, looks at the richest, most powerful women in the country, and calls them cows of Bashan, which was basically saying they were the fattest, most well-fed livestock. I mean, this isn't just a clever insult. He's saying they'd become so consumed by their own appetites that they've lost their humanity. They're like animals, just demanding more to drink, not caring that it's all funded by crushing the needy. And he paints this incredibly vivid picture of the world they'd built. It's all about extreme self-indulgence. We're talking ivory inlaid furniture, the best food, non-stop parties, drinking wine not by the glass but by the bowlful. But that last line, man, that's the real gut punch. They were so wrapped up in their own luxury that they were completely blind to the fact that their nation was rotting from the inside out. And that blindness was about to cost them everything. But, as we all know, a life of total self-indulgence that's built on the suffering of others, well, it can't last. Sooner or later, the bill comes due. And Amos makes it crystal clear that God's judgments are never just random. The punishment is always designed to poetically and justly fit the crime. And the judgment that Amos pronounces is just terrifyingly specific. He tells these cows of Bashan that they will be dragged out of their fancy houses with hooks. And listen, this wasn't some wild metaphor. We have historical records, actual Assyrian carvings from that time that show this exact practice. They would march conquered nobles into exile with hooks through their lips or noses. It's this awful, poetic justice, isn't it? The very people who treated the poor like livestock would now be led away like animals themselves. You know, when a society gets this obsessed with luxury, it starts to have a corrosive effect on everything, especially the legal system. And this brings us to Amos's second huge indictment. Justice itself was up for sale. This wasn't just a few bad actors. The entire system was rotten. The rich and powerful were using the courts as a tool to get even richer. And it's just how systemic it all was. Amos lays out this devastating list. The courts were rigged. The poor were literally trampled underfoot. People had become so greedy that they would sell a person into debt slavery for something as trivial as the price of a pair of sandals. When you read this, you realize they had completely forgotten that every person has dignity. The poor had become just commodities, things to be bought and sold for a quick buck.
And into this world of corruption, Amos delivers this absolutely immortal line. He's not just asking for a few small changes or a little more charity. No, he's demanding a flood, a complete, total transformation of society where justice and righteousness are the most powerful, unstoppable forces, as constant as a mighty river. It's a call to return to the very values that were supposed to define them as a people.
So how did they get here? How did a nation that saw itself as blessed by God go so completely off the rails? The answer is actually pretty simple. They had a blueprint, a set of instructions for how to build a just society. And they had forgotten all about it.
I mean, just look at this. It's so stark. On one side, Amos says they're lounging around on garments they took as collateral from the poor, which is often their only coat, the only thing they had to keep warm at night. But on the other side, their own sacred law, the Torah, explicitly forbids this. It says you have to return a poor person's cloak by sunset so they don't freeze. This isn't just some minor slip-up. This is a total rejection of who they were supposed to be.
And this whole idea was spelled out so clearly for them in their law. Deuteronomy has this really beautiful practical logic. Step 1, the ideal. In a land this blessed by God, there shouldn't be any poverty. Step 2, the reality check. But because humans are humans, there will always be poor people. So step 3, the command that flows from that reality. Therefore, you must open your hand wide. In a world with no social safety nets, this kind of radical generosity wasn't just a nice idea. It was a matter of life and death. So what was the big motivation behind all this? Why was this so important? It all came down to their own national story. The command to be generous was always followed by this one crucial reminder. Remember, you were slaves. The memory of their own oppression was supposed to fuel their empathy. They were meant to see their own past in the faces of the poor. But somewhere along the way, in all their comfort and wealth, they had simply forgotten. And this is the moment where this ancient prophet's message becomes a timeless, urgent warning for all of us. Because the names have changed, the centuries have passed, but the basic story, it remains exactly the same. The battle between greed and generosity, between justice and oppression, that's a fight that's still going on right here, right now.
I mean, just think about it. The status symbols are different, but the temptation is identical. Their luxury was ivory furniture. Ours is a 50-inch TV. Theirs was expensive jewelry. Ours is the latest smartphone. It's so easy to look back and judge ancient Israel, but if we're being honest, our world constantly tells us we need more, that happiness is just one more purchase away. And that's a really hard message to ignore.
And that brings us to this really sobering thought. The people Amos was talking to lived lives that by our standards were incredibly simple, and yet they were still totally consumed by materialism. So what does that say about us, who are surrounded by an avalanche of advertising and consumer choice they couldn't have even dreamed of? As the quote asks, what chance do we have?
And that really leaves us with the final challenging question to chew on. Amos spoke to a simple agricultural society about the dangers of wealth. If he showed up today and saw our global economy, the massive wealth gaps, the extreme poverty, and the extreme luxury, what would his message be for us? It's a question we really have to answer for ourselves. But the good news, the message of Amos is that it's never too late to choose a different path. We can still be a people who let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream.